Thank you for attending the Cannabis Investor Webcast. I would like to thank our platinum sponsors, Nemus Bioscience, Kaya Holdings, formerly Alternative Fuels Americas, Aurora Cannabis, Tariga Sciences, Organogram, and Technical 420. To view Technical 420's latest stock report, please visit www.technical420.com. To ask our next presenter a question, please type your question in the question box in the lower right screen. Our presenter today is John Hollister, CEO of Nemus Bioscience Incorporated. And John, give me a couple of seconds and I will make you a presenter and switch the screen over to you.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce, this is John Hollister, CEO of Nemus Bioscience. It's my pleasure to introduce Nemus to you all. Before we get going, we'd really encourage you to read this forward-looking statement as while I will make every attempt to be as accurate as we possibly can. We're talking about things that can happen in the future. I'd also invite you to pull down our 10K that was just filed last week so that you can read it because it describes who we are, our background, our plans, and also the risks associated with this field. The company overview, Nemus Bioscience. Our goal is to offer physicians and patients the medical benefits that I think many of you in the audience are familiar with, condition-specific cannabinoid-based products to alleviate symptoms associated with a range of debilitating diseases. And we want to become the premier developer of cannabis-based, cannabis-derived pharmaceuticals on a global basis. Below are kind of our financial, we are on the OTCQB as NMUS, and I think those are all the important variables for us. We have a fairly good ownership by our directors and officers and employees. We have a relatively small number of shares outstanding at 16 million and change. We're based in Costa Mesa and in Oxford, Mississippi. We have a proprietary product pipeline that runs the spectrum from composition of matter to formulation to use of cannabinoids. We are the only partner of the University of Mississippi, and that's important because the University of Mississippi, as many of you know, is the only entity in the United States authorized by the federal government to cultivate cannabis for research purposes and have been doing so for quite some time. We've also put together a really top-drawer management team with deep experience in drug development, pharmaceutical, biotech, as well as building companies and public companies on top of that. What are cannabinoids? Well, I think the audience, I'm pretty certain most of you are familiar that they have many effects on the body's systems. These have been well documented in no small part by materials cultivated at the University of Mississippi. These are 6 of the primary areas, but there are roughly 104 identified cannabinoids right now, and we're working with a number of them. While cannabinoids work in lots of systems, they also they experience certain issues, and particularly orally consumed cannabinoids are subject to high patient-to-patient variability. This is seen whether in pill or in spray form, and they're a product of individual genetic metabolic processes that we have in our liver that differ from one person to the next, where one person consumes something and gets a huge effect, or lots of the product is bioavailable, or versus the next who gets almost no effect because the body's just metabolized in a different way. It can also be influenced by medications and can also be impacted by what one eats. And this is represented in the package inserts of the products in the United States, both Marinol and Sazomet, or Dronabinol and Nabilone, as well as in overseas in Sativex. So our goal, if you're thinking about it, is deliver these effects, the benefits, the potential benefits of cannabinoids, but by bypassing the liver, this first pass metabolization. And on this slide, you see a precursor drug, not one that we're developing, but a precursor drug that was administered to humans. And the blue line that you see shows the plasma concentrations of delta-9 THC with a suppository form. And you see this classic, this was a pill form, a 10 milligram pill. And you see the classic spiking, a very high level, and then it drops very rapidly. The THC 10 milligram version that you see on the, I think, green graph where the peak isn't as high and it's much more sustained effect in the therapeutic window. That's what you see when you bypass the liver on first pass. So we're looking to replicate this with other forms of ocular, transmucosal, rectal, possibly intranasal and transdermal delivery of cannabinoids. As you all are clearly aware, developing cannabis-derived medicines has challenges. It's a highly regulated environment, whether it's the International Convention of the INCB, DEA oversight, NIDA, as well as the FDA, which we're very familiar with. And so we need to figure out how to navigate these areas. It does impact the research community in that there are limited number, although there are quite a few, who are licensed by DEA to actually handle Schedule I products, but it does constrain the number of sites where one can work. Additionally, it impacts importation and export laws and regs. As I mentioned before, the only federally approved source of cannabis in the country is the University of Mississippi, and they've had a long-standing relationship with the multiple regulatory bodies. Under the single convention back in the early 70s, over 100 member nations signed up to control the movement and the illicit movement of some scheduled products around the world. Part of that agreement is the designation that each member country can have they can designate one entity to supply the research community, and that entity has selected the University of Mississippi to be the place that cultivates and has been doing work in understanding cannabis, how to grow it, the genetics of it, how to extract products, how to develop testing, etc. They've been doing that since 1968. They have more than 40 years of experience with cannabis that we now have had the pleasure of working with. They also have been working with the DEA so that they can have their licenses and expand their work. This enables us to work with the University of Mississippi and their experience with these different regulatory bodies, and has resulted in a number of things. One, we've added 45 years of research experience, just bolted it onto ourselves, with some of the world's leading botanical researchers and members of the School of Pharmacy at the Ole Miss. Within that, we have licensed the rights to a novel THC prodrug, an ester of THC, which is a more hydrolyzable compound. What I mean by that is, unlike the more lipophilic delta-9 THC, a more oily product that is very difficult for the body to absorb without having been broken down, this compound is more hydrolyzable and can cross a number of different barriers. We already know that to be the case. We've entered into multiple license agreements with the university and research agreement. We have perpetual worldwide rights to this compound and can combine it in other different formulations. We also have a lab on site, and we have access to a large number of globally recognized scientific leaders in this area. We've also partnered with the university to work in a whole bunch of different areas that are ongoing as we speak right now. I won't touch on many of those, but they are ongoing. If we look at the executed agreements that we already have, I mentioned the first one, which is a recurring option agreement for this THC ester. It is a worldwide option. It can be combined in any formulation. We have 3 different formulations. So these are delivery agreements, license agreements, one for a suppository, one for transmucosal, and one for ocular. These are specific to this Delta 9 THC ester. And then lastly, it was announced just last week that we have, or a couple of weeks ago, that we have a research agreement that we have come to terms with in studying MRSA or MRSA with a topical compound to treat Staphylococcus aureus infections. In terms of our drug pipeline, this is an overview. We have a couple of compounds that are in preclinical. We're working on formulations. They are both the THC-derived. Anxiety and epilepsy are a little earlier on in research. And then lastly, the one I just spoke of with methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. Let me describe a little bit about the lead compound and why we selected it. Last year, we conducted a strategic asset management analysis. It's a very conventional study that you do in big pharma or in biotechs. We had a consultancy that looked at some 45 different potential indications, and glaucoma was selected as the lead for a whole host of reasons that I'll touch on as I go through the next few slides. But first and foremost, it's a very large market that has an unmet need. With roughly 3 million Americans suffering from glaucoma, it's the #1 lead or cause of blindness. Roughly 50% of people being treated with the existing agents need 2 or more of those medicines. And so there's a lot of transience within the market, which makes it, one, it's dissatisfied, and 2, it makes it attractive for a new entrant, and especially one that's coming from a new approach. That is, the mechanism of action that our product has would be unique in the marketplace. There are no current cures, and there has been a new mechanism of action in, I think, now 20 years or so, which would be exciting for the market. What we know about our candidate, this was presented at the American Association of Professional Scientists down at the AAPS down in San Diego in October of last year, is that our candidate penetrates all 3 chambers of the eye. This was done in a rabbit model. It reduces intraocular pressure by upwards of 50%. That's what was shown in the study, which is in line with or significantly better than what the existing products did in the comparable studies when they did that. The IOP reduction is currently the only proven method to treat glaucoma. Importantly, there was no detectable Delta 9 THC in the circulating systemic system of the rabbits. More has to be studied in that area. It could be that just the amount of THC that is present in the eye is not as a result of these drops. The actual amount of the compound in the drops is very, very small. So it's nice to be able to use a very small amount of product. But you also know that it's, for whatever reason, is not at detectable levels in the circulating system. We're working on developing this so that it would be a once per day or twice a day medication. We believe that it has the potential to qualify for a fast track qualification because of unmet needs as a medical breakthrough. It would be a new drug in its class, and our IP covers the composition of matter as well as the method of use. What we also know is there's a high probability of success in this space, in that there has been literature that has shown the beneficial effects of inhaled cannabis for treating of glaucoma. Although a benefit in reduction of IOP, there are concerns that have been expressed about the reduction of systemic blood pressure, which then could reduce the amount of blood flow to the optic nerve, offsetting any benefits. So the American Association of Ophthalmology is not supportive of the use of systemic THC for the treatment of glaucoma, but they have gone on record as suggesting that if you could localize the effect on just the eye, that there is some potential there. So that's what we are hoping to do. Just an overview of the timeline. Right now, on the left side, we're working on CMC and formulation. Beginning of next year, we'll have clinical batch production and do IND-enabling studies. And then the latter part of the year, we will file an IND and then conduct phase 1B, 2A clinical trials in the first portion of Q1 2017. Why this is really interesting in glaucoma for a whole sorts of reasons is as attractive for us. The pathway is well known. The clinical trials are typically smaller in terms of numbers because it's an objective measure. There are a number of examples of companies that have gone through this pathway, and we can evaluate the size of studies. Additionally, the duration of the studies is much shorter than you'd see, at least has been in the past. So all of these are exciting. And then lastly, what makes glaucoma very interesting in ophthalmological products is that deals are done typically in pharma development or in biotech development. Deals are typically done in phase 3 when risks are decreasing and you have a better sense of what you have. In this case, the ocular space, deals are done in more of a bimodal distribution. As many deals are done in the late preclinical stage and or at the end of phase 1B, 2A as are done at phase 3. So that's exciting for us from an opportunity perhaps to get some either partnering or even acquisition of one of our areas of development in our cannabinoid platform. A second area, and I'm going to just breeze across this right now, is our most recently announced research area with the university, and this is in methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. The university has a great deal of experience screening different compounds, botanical compounds, in the area of inhibition of pathogens, including MRSA. And so we're looking to optimize various cannabinoids to see what combination can help reduce this crisis issue that's really plagues many hospitals in the United States and worldwide, and also other institutional environments like the military, athletic facilities. It has a very large cost associated for those institutions and a human cost with 11,000 deaths annually in the United States and 80,000 invasive infections. There's roughly a systems cost of about $3.2 to $4 billion just in the U.S. alone. There's also a fair body of literature that has demonstrated the inhibitory effects of, or the antibacterial effects of cannabinoids on this class of drugs, on methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, and to date, no resistance has been seen in this class of treatment. From a partnership perspective or manufacturing perspective, we do our work, as I've described, with the University of Mississippi. It's our discovery zone, it's our research, and on some level our development group. We enjoy a very, very strong relationship with them. They're experts in extraction. They've looked at every known technique and modeled out and actually have patented a number of them. And so we were able to either work with extracts and or work with synthetic manufacturers who we're also reaching out to determine which partner would be best for us. We have not determined yet absolutely what our finished product will be, and we're working on that. From a commercialization perspective, we work at this stage with a bunch of partners, and we'll do so for the foreseeable future, and that includes the University of Mississippi for raw materials, discovery, IP, another lab in the Mississippi area we also work with. We have legal and IP partners because that's very important to our strategy. We are working with one or more drug development groups, consultancies, as well as CMO and CRO firms, and ultimately a CMO for manufacturing our API. And then lastly, we're looking to commercialize via pharmaceutical or theoretically potentially biotech partners, as we don't see ourselves building out a sales force of 3,000, 4,000 people and all the infrastructure to support that. We have, as I mentioned, a tremendous management team. Kaz Lykos is co-founder and officer and the chairman of our board. Cause was principal in determining that the only legal pathway that could be undertaken in this field, and that is because today University of Mississippi is the only entity that can legally cultivate cannabis. I'm sorry about that. Can legally cultivate cannabis. Anywhere else, the DEA could, regardless if you're in a legal state or not, could theoretically come in and confiscate your property. So that cause chose to look at how to take the thought of extracting cannabinoids and bringing it to the FDA. How could that actually be achieved? And the University of Mississippi was the only pathway that we could determine to do so. Cause is a lawyer by training and a serial entrepreneur, and very, very successful in doing so. He's a great guy and a great chairman of our board. My background is post-Stanford. Went to SmithKline Beecham. I actually, in classic management fashion, development there. Carried a bag for a while, then went into product management. Was sent to Europe to help start a sales force. Came back to the U.S. and launched my first product. And then after that, my wife and young family and I chose to take a position in the West Coast, where we're both from, in the Bay Area, to be the head of marketing for a small biotech company. And after that company, went to Southern California to help launch a product called Neulasta at Amgen, where I also became the global commercial lead for oncology and led a number of different teams in bringing products into humans, as well as phase 1, 2, 3, and worldwide management of Neulasta at phase 4. From Amgen, went and ran a device company, and then I was an executive in a diagnostics company before being asked to join this great team. We added very quickly, looked around for what was necessary, a really good chief medical officer, and got the best, Brian Murphy, who was trained in New York, then went to Tufts residency and did dual fellowships at Mass General and actually taught at Harvard clinical trial design. Went back to the state of New York, where he was director of research in the Catholic hospital system of New York. He saw patients, and during the grand rounds, unbeknownst to him, the CEO of Hoffman LaRoche was there, who approached him afterwards and asked him if he'd ever entertained the concept of going into industry, which he had not at the time. But he jumped and went to Hoffman LaRoche. Then he went in, and actually while he was there, completed his MBA at Columbia. Then came west to Intermune and to Valiant, where he was actually in charge of product Navalone, or Sesmet, THC product. And then he went to a couple of biotech companies, but before jumping to us. And then lastly, Liz Perez, also a Stanford grad, and she has great both small company and large company and public CFO experience, which has been very helpful for us in our process. We also are supported by some additional excellent board members. Tom George joined us a couple months ago. He's the CFO of Decorative Brands Company in Santa Barbara. It's a $4 billion public company. He chairs our audit committee. Jerry McLaughlin is the CEO of a biotech company with backgrounds at Merck, Endo, and just a super helped us. On the advisory side, we also get support from Mahmoud El-Salih at University of Mississippi, as he is the editor of, or the author of, most of the medical texts on cannabis use. Kurt Scribner is a very prominent and experienced regulatory consultant. He's very helpful, and Dave Skavinsky is a serial entrepreneur, strategic advisor, and very helpful in the healthcare space. With that, I will turn it over to you all, and again, I apologize for being a few minutes late due to some technical difficulties.
Thank you, John. Give me a couple of seconds to queue up questions.
Thank you.
The first question you're researching the entourage effect / different combinations of compounds. I guess that's a question. Are you researching the entourage effect / different combinations of compounds?
So I guess it's a great question. So, you know, and the background for that is, you know, what is it in these plants that have the effect? Our focus right now is in isolating individual cannabinoids and purifying them and seeing and targeting them for systems that are specific or that we hope will specifically benefit from those for very particular disorders. Does that mean that we won't be looking at products in combination? Well, in MRSA, as I shared earlier, we definitely are looking for combinations, and it's likely we will be doing the same for several different indications. And so the simple answer is it depends. There are some places where individual cannabinoids clearly have a beneficial effect for very specific uses. And I would say glaucoma is an example. It may well be that there are other disorders of the eye that would benefit from a different cannabinoid, and so we will explore those also. Great question.
Next question, John, and this question also, I have a problem also differentiating, you know, natural wellness company with pharmaceutical biotech. So could you explain the difference between these two?
Yeah, so they are different areas. I've actually helped, in consulting terms, a company that is an herbal medicine company that was looking to take themselves from the shelf at, you know, Whole Foods and other stores to the FDA pathway. So I'm pretty well versed in the differences. I think of it as this way: the FDA pathway is there to supply physicians, medical science, medical doctors, with a rigorously tested compound that you know has been tested for a particular use. The dose has been tested. The production of it is highly regulated and very consistent. And so that the physician can be trained on how to use it for a particular patient. You can write a prescription, and then the insurance model, so this is the healthcare model that we work in today, can then determine whether this is something they want to pay for, reimburse, or not. So our model is to go and take our very specific compounds, do all of the necessary work, line it all up, and then go to the, and some of that's actually working with the FDA before you get there, to go to the FDA to present them with the body of data that allows them to establish a medical claim, as opposed to the medical marijuana area where they typically are not doing the clinical trials nor are resourced to do the clinical trials necessary to have a medical claim. That is, they can talk about a physiological activity but not make a medical claim, or it will be governed, you know, it will be governed by the FDA. The FDA will step in, and we've seen this recently actually in our field. What I know from my own experience with a number of physician friends is they generally feel confident in the state of California that, you know, there are medical uses for cannabis. That's what I would say is a generalization. And many of them have actually written prescriptions, and those prescriptions are then fulfilled at a place of a dispensary. The individual physician then loses contact with what's actually dispensed. There's not a feedback mechanism except for that unique experience with the patient, whatever they say back to the physician. And all those don't really work for the physician model. And so we're satisfying the need of the physician model. There are going to be other people who will look up to other ways, and that's not our market. I hope that helps.
All right, next question. How much of a role do synthetics rather than cannabis-derived cannabinoids play in your research efforts?
So that's a good question. So at this point, Our research is done on plant and plant-derived product. So we look to find unique molecules and work to see what their activity is in these molecules and manipulate them, and then we determine whether it's optimal for us to manufacture or produce a final form in a synthetic form, which is, by the way, the exact same molecule. It's just manufactured as opposed to being harvested, if you will, from the plant.
Next question. What is the FDA approval rate? I don't know if you know the answer to that question, but I guess the question is regarding it. It's probably very difficult to get approval from the FDA.
Yeah. So there aren't any percentages that I could offer to you. We are going to do our best. We have a fabulous chief medical officer, and we're going to surround ourselves with very good people. Our investors have been very supportive of us doing the right thing, which means and I have a lot of experience in this also, in what do you need to do at this stage to do your best work so that by the time you have a conversation with the FDA, which we will do before too long, that you are prepared as best you can, and that the pathway will help them be able to review the product, the testing, the manufacturing, and all of the processes that led to that. And so that's the way that you reduce the risk with the FDA.
What is the next major catalyst for Nemus? Would it be Schedule 1 to Schedule 2, next round of funding, clinical trials, FDA approval?
No, so we want to lock down the formulations on glaucoma to meet our target product profile. So those are very important to us. We have different molecules that we're looking at in development, which we're hopeful that we can produce some good news in the not too distant future. So those are the nearest term. We also would like to see our MRSA work that we're doing, which has very discrete decision points, be successful. And so those are our near term, kind of, if you will, milestone events of this year that we're working very hard at achieving.
Next question. Which markets are the largest? Glaucoma, multiple sclerosis, anxiety, epilepsy, or MRSA?
Well, yeah. So the glaucoma market by itself is a very large market. It's a $2 billion prescription market in the U.S. today, and that's even under the influence of the generic. So it's a very large marketplace, and so if you expand that area, you're talking by itself a very large market. Clearly, on the list that we have there in our early programs, the other one that's a very large market, anxiety. It's a substantial market. Spasticity is a high-need market. It's a market that patients really suffer terribly, and it'd be nice to be able to introduce a product with very big patient effects. But size-wise, it's not as substantial a market. The epilepsy market similarly has some subsets, and I think they're well documented now since there are a number of compounds in development to look at very small populations in the orphan drug indication. But what's not spoken about is that there's a very large adult population that suffers terribly from epilepsy, and our target is that. We hope to have a unique molecule that will allow us to go and help that population.
Next question. What is the current treatment for glaucoma now, and how effective is that treatment, and how does your product differ?
Yeah. So there are currently licensed 4 different classes of drugs. About 50% of the market is a class of drugs called prostaglandins. They showed roughly similar effects in rabbits as did we. They are the most effective of the class of drugs on the market. All four of the classes carry what are called black box warnings, so they have some safety issues associated with them, systemic safety issues, which we are hopeful that we won't carry any of those. I say hopeful. There weren't any indications in our, at least in the animal model, of things to be concerned about, but obviously we will monitor that closely in subsequent trials. Beta blockers are the second largest group of products, and they are used often in combination with prostaglandins. So, and then there are two smaller classes of drugs. But as I said before, what you see are issues with each of the classes, and also some tendencies in these classes to have what's called tachyphylaxis, where the individual eyes become more resistant to the treatment, and they need to have a different treatment or two treatments. So there's always an opportunity to get into these, and we projected for ourselves what we believe to be a fairly conservative 10% penetration in peak year, and that makes a very attractive market for us.
Next question. How much funding do you need to get products to the market?
Yes, so we've forecasted and shared that we believe that we need somewhere between $10 and $15 million to get through phase 1B, 2A in glaucoma. And so we've spoken to that topic, and so that's, for the next couple of years. It depends a little on what other drugs and compounds we raise or create in the lab. But that's our focus of our company today, is we really are focused on glaucoma, and we think that would be sufficient funding for that period of time.
Next question. Let me see if I could read this correctly. What is the purpose of the U.S. government owning the patent when they do not enforce the patent?
Well, I don't know that I understand the question, and I don't know that I have a rationale for it. The U.S. government does own a great number of patents in the cannabis space, as they have been the funder of a great deal of research through NIH, and the result of that have been patents. Many of those are kind of dated at this stage, but I would say it is one of those catch-22s of because international law encourages funding of research, but the government is, at the time, certainly, and that seems to be changing, had a very negative view on illicit cannabis, and that kept the free use of the medical side of it.
So are you saying that other medical marijuana companies are at risk? I mean, they could be at risk. I mean, could the federal government shut them down, I guess? Is that
well, technically and legally, if you look at the rights and responsibilities of the DEA, yes, it doesn't matter where you are, the DEA has that authority to find you in conflict with federal law. So that's the debate that's going on between states' rights and federal rights right now. And we're fortunate because we are partners with the one entity that enables us to be able to be the beneficiary of the research at this stage, and that's very helpful to us. But I know the subtle point of that is that there are roughly 100 individuals at University of Mississippi who work on some way or another in this area and have been doing so for a very long time, and all of a sudden they become our partners, and that's really a very special situation for us.
Okay, that concludes our Q&A. We're almost ready for the next presentation. John, do you have any comments that you want to give, any closing comments?
We're just, thank you to everyone. First of all, thank you for your audience for paying attention, and we're just very excited at Nemus. We really, the momentum is picking up. We have a lot of excitement and enthusiasm that's growing around the company and around those who are now familiar with us. So we appreciate your support, your interest, and can't wait to exceed all your expectations.
Well, thank you, John, for being a platinum sponsor and sponsoring us for the entire year. We thank you. Our